Good morning and welcome to Wine Business Monthly's Tasting Room Survey Results webinar. My name is Erin Kirschenmann. I'm the managing editor of Wine Business Monthly, and joining me today is Andrew Adams, editor of the Wine Analytics Report. We're so excited to have you all here today, and the participants are absolutely staggering. We have representatives from some of the smallest companies at 300 case production, all the way up to the largest wine company in the world and from across the United States. So thank you for joining us to talk a little bit more about the heartbeat of our direct-to-consumer sales, the tasting room. Before we get started, a quick note. In the past, we've done this tasting room survey and then released the results in Wine Business Monthly. Today we're moving a little bit into the more modern age and doing a broadcast with you. And as part of that, we want to make sure that we're fielding your questions. So we've set up a text line for you. If you have questions for Andrew, myself, or any of our guest speakers today, please feel free to send them to 707-395-7375, and we'll be getting them and answering them as they come in. All right, Andrew, can you tell us a little bit more about the survey this year?
For sure. As Erin mentioned, my name is Andrew Adams. I'm the editor of the Wine Analytics Report, which is a digital publication that's part of the Wine Business Analytics Data Group. Now, as our company has integrated further, the data group has taken over the survey, and what we've done is been able to leverage our winery database, which includes more than 11,500 wineries across the United States, and continues to be the most accurate and comprehensive database of U.S. wineries, and in fact, most of North America. Now, using that, we created a representative sample for all the key questions, and then further bolstered that data by a partnership with Community Benchmark. Now, some of you may know them, most of you may work with them, many of you may work with them. What they do is they aggregate anonymized DTC data, and then we coupled that with our survey reports for even more representative data that we're going to dig into here shortly.
Perfect. Great. Well, today, we couldn't talk about the tasting room without also just briefly mentioning that there has been an annual change in direct-to-consumer sales for over the last year or so. Change in volume, change in value is kind of all over the place depending on where you are, where your winery is located, how big or how small it is. And we just wanted to point out some of these changes. Today, though, we really will be focusing on the tasting room, the heart of consumer engagement, where people are really coming in contact with your winery and your brand. So with that, we'd like to start out with some of the tasting room visitation.
For sure, and this is a major story that I'm sure you've been reading about, you've been seeing within your own data, and hearing about when you talk to your colleagues in the industry. As you can see here, this is something that we've further confirmed in our survey. Visitation, this is the median annual visitation numbers for wineries in major key regions and across the United States are down across the board. Now, it's fairly modest in places like Sonoma County, where we're actually broadcasting to you from, and much more significant when you look at the rest of the United States at 16, and Napa down at 10%. The reasons for this have been widely speculated upon and reported, but again, we're seeing the main trend in my mind is just the continuing disruptions of, regular business from year to year thanks to the pandemic. Thankfully, we're getting beyond that, and that is actually one of the reasons why we might be seeing a decline in visitation, because it was such at record highs in 2021. And I don't know about you, but I have little enthusiasm for some of the things I had to do during the pandemic. People enjoyed tasting rooms, they were open, it was great, and it really was a vibrant time in terms of 2021. But as soon as people were able to travel again in 2022, we saw tasting room visitation decline about 12%, again, thanks to Community Benchmark. And then so far this year, thanks to a very wet start to 2022 in terms of, again, thankfully a lot of rain, visitation is down by another 10% to an average about 17% through the year.
I have to admit, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I did not love all the rain, right? It really did bring tasting room visitation down. But the thing that really stands out to me is that we're comparing these are 2022 numbers compared to 2021. And as 2021 was the first year straight out of the pandemic, and we know we all saw record growth in tasting room visitation, the numbers are only down about 10 to 16% or 14% in the rest of California, 4% in Sonoma. That's not that bad.
Yeah. And that's
right? It's not that high.
It's not that high. And also, I forgot to mention, I mentioned our database. We segment the survey results by region, but also by winery size. And for some wineries, in fact, the smallest, they've had a very good year with tasting room traffic up about 13%.
Yeah, absolutely. All about loyalty with those smaller brands and smaller tasting rooms. Well, to build on that loyalty and to sort of make sure that people were actually coming into the tasting room this year, we thought we'd ask about SMS text message usage. And I remember the days when I would get a text message from a company and I would just kind of roll my eyes and go, oh, I can't believe it. But I think thanks to COVID and some of all of the reservations that we had to make for restaurants, for any sort of activity we were doing, we started to get used to it a little bit. And so what this graph shows us is just how wineries were using text messaging in 2022. And for the most part, they were there to monitor reservations, to make sure that people were actually coming in, to give a little extra hand-holding and more contact points with the person coming in to make sure that their experience lived up to what they were expecting. And so I just find this really fascinating that we've moved to a point where consumers are excited to get a text message from their winery, right?
For sure, and it really underlines the importance of a good relationship with your best customers. And as we'll see in terms of average order, which are the most lucrative, club memberships are incredibly important. And there is a window here too. It is pretty well accepted at the moment, but of course it's getting spammed out. I like to point out that when I was doing an article about this for the analytics report, I literally got 2 spam text messages. One was for an election in Virginia, congressional one at that. So yeah, it's getting spammy quick. So we need to leverage this window in terms of adoption when we can use it.
Yeah, keep the politics out. Keep telling me when my wine club shipment is going to arrive at my doorstep, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, perfect. Well, I mentioned club shipments. Of course, we have to start talking about some of the average order values that we saw in 2022.
For sure, and of course you see here in terms of the most lucrative, as I mentioned, Wine Club really stands out. This is a bit of an eye chart, but again it shows the precision and granularity of data we're excited to present to you. And in terms of highest average order out of the Wine Club, Napa County right there at 468, but close behind at 427 as wineries surveyed in Sonoma County.
Some of these, I have to admit, some of these order values are just incredibly high. Oh my goodness, it's good to see for Wine Club, right? That in Napa, Sonoma, we're getting over $400 per order. Mm-hmm. But what I'm really shocked to see are some of these on-site event and off-site event numbers, as well as some of the telesales. Given that we're so open to SMS text messaging now for reservations, for Wine Club shipments, I'm surprised that telesales has seen such low average order values in 2022.
That is surprising. That is.
Yeah.
And, because some wineries, it's not widely accepted or not widely practiced, as we also see in the survey again this year, but it can be quite successful for wineries that commit to it and have cross-trained their tasting room staff who may have an actual personal relationship with their best club member customers to reach out on the phone. Again, like a text message saying your Wine Club shipment's ready or is ready for pickup. You may very well like to hear from that tasting room person who sold you on the membership. So, it's interesting also, I just want to note in terms of the Wine Club and tasting room, in Napa and Sonoma, in terms of percentage of overall DTC sales, the Wine Club actually edges out the tasting room by about 50% to a third or 33%. You see across the United States a much higher reliance on the tasting room in terms of total DTC sales with a share of about 63%. And in the Pacific Northwest, it's about 38% from the tasting room and 45% out of the Wine Club.
Great, absolutely. So, speaking of conversion rates, right? When people come into your tasting room, then's the absolute perfect time to see if you can convert them into a sale or into a Wine Club member. And something that we've been talking about for a long time is converting them to your mailing list, providing the opportunity for them to order off of your website at a later date. I'm a little surprised by some of this. It seems like making the conversion to mailing list is just rather difficult in a lot of these regions. Wine Club, of course, has always been a bit of a challenge, right? You're expecting your consumers to sign up for multiple shipments over a long period of time with maybe not a set dollar value per shipment, especially as we move into a tougher economic time. Making that ask is going to be even more difficult. But it's very, very encouraging and good to see that that conversion rates are very high at about 75%, between that 60-75% range.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's great. When you look at the sales coming out of the tasting room, that direct sales, it's cash at the day, it's wonderful. However, you do need to be mindful of, though, in terms of those lucrative club orders, if you're if someone buys 2 bottles of Chardonnay, has a great experience, and leaves without signing up for the mailing list or possibly getting sold on a membership, you might be losing some available income there in terms of not building a relationship rather than focusing on the sale. So that's just something to think about in terms of looking at conversion, particularly when you look at the higher club conversion rates for Napa and Sonoma County.
Well, that segues perfectly to our first guest speaker, Tracy Timmins from Stoller Wine Group. Building that relationship, yes, we need to talk about dollars, right? Revenue is what keeps the wine business going. However, building the relationship, building something long-term, having brand ambassadors out and about in the world it's essential, right? And I know that Tracy has been working on some of these relationship building techniques with her staff in order to make sure that they get continued revenue growth. So Tracy, I'm so happy to have you join us today. Thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with your staff to sort of increase those conversion rates?
Yeah, I sure can. Thanks for having me this morning. Our team works on our club conversion strategies and checking in with our managers and with our hosts on a regular basis, just because, as you've mentioned, our club members are really the backbone of our entire D2C program. So we work directly with our hosts, with our concierge team, with our sales professionals, and begin to build a profile both on our membership and on guests that are coming to join us for the first time. So as soon as they join us in the tasting room, we might have some background information to speak to them about a prior visit. If it's their first time visiting us, our concierge team works to fill out a profile of why they might be visiting us, where they're visiting from, what their goals are for their visit. And then the team members work on consultative selling techniques where they're taking the visitors on a journey of learning about our property, but also we work really hard to learn about our visitors as well. So we can present a club membership that might work with their buying habits, might work with how they like to entertain, or what types of foods they like to prepare on Tuesday night at home. So our team members are always checking in with one another, seeing where the trends are with guest visitation. If we're having any types of new challenges with signing up for a club, we do a lot of roundtables within our team to see where those challenges might be coming from.
Where do you see the majority of those challenges coming from? I mean, what's stopping people from purchasing bottles or from joining the club?
It seems like in recent months, the hesitation might be coming from either uncertainty with finances, or we also are hearing that folks just have accumulated a lot of bottles at home during the pandemic. I think we, like others, saw very robust online spending and lots of really good response to our call campaigns, and folks were kind of shoring up their online their at-home stocks of wine. And so now that might be a hesitation. So they feel like they already have a lot of wine at home. However, we also see that people are more willing to perhaps consider joining a club when the activities have come back. So we know that folks really enjoyed visiting us on site for various events, whether that's wine club pickups or access to winemaker dinners. So we're trying to work really hard to bringing back different ways for members to communicate with us and to interact with us, whether that's online or on site in our various tasting rooms and facilities.
You know, we've talked a lot about tasting room visitation being down, and, you know, not to belabor the point, but You mentioned that you're doing a lot of on-site events. I know you've talked about different classes or things that you're doing at the winery to bring people back in. Is that something that you're going to continue? And are you going to, in an effort to maybe encourage tasting room visitation to come back up, start allowing more walk-ins?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, we've already started easing our way back into a wide variety of events, and then we're continuously getting feedback from our guests to see what they're wanting to do and how they're wanting to interact with us. We do have a combination of both reservation and walk-in availability at all of our locations. So we want to be able to offer, that guaranteed spots and a guaranteed activity for those folks that have really enjoyed the reservation spaces, and knowing that if they come out on a Saturday, they're definitely going to have a table. So we're going to continue with reservations available to our guests. But we also know that people's lives change and they might wake up on a Saturday morning. Recently, we've been blessed with some fabulous sunny weather here in Oregon. And so they might all of a sudden decide that they'd really love to come out and visit us, whether it's in the vineyard or it's in one of our wine bars. And we want those folks to know that they're welcome as well.
That's great. Tracy, I'm curious because I know you invest in a lot of engaging technology in the tasting room. Is that helping you connect and build those relationships with the new consumer to wine or perhaps younger consumers?
Yeah, I think that's some of the interesting things that we've tried out. We have augmented reality, we have virtual reality, we have interactive tables that folks can kind of explore on their own if they're not wanting to ask maybe an in-depth question about the wines, or maybe they're a little bit nervous to learn about terroir. They could interact with technology that can give them that education and not need to ask that of their host. So I think that's been a fun addition to our programming for guests to just interact with our brands, interact with our vineyards in a different way. It just gives us something unique, a different reason to come out and visit us. And it's something that we're going to just continue to pull on that thread and see where it takes us.
Wonderful. And to kind of continue on that technology trend, how are you using technology to follow up post-tasting room to encourage more sales after your guests have already left?
So that goes back to being committed to building profiles about our guests. We want to understand why they've come to visit us, what they enjoyed most about their visit. Were they visiting us for an event, or were they visiting us for a classic tasting experience? And while they were there for that classic tasting experience, what did we learn about them? Do we know that they have a wedding coming up, or perhaps a graduation or another special event that would give us a reason to touch base with them? And then during the pandemic, especially during the early months when we were all closed, our team made a really big effort to call everybody. We went to just an old school picking up that phone and trying to make a personal connection. And we found that our members in particular just really enjoyed that. So we've never moved away from that. We have ongoing call campaigns, and they're not even necessarily with the intention of making a sale. Oftentimes, we're just calling to check in and say, hey, I'm calling from Oregon. What's it like out there in Pennsylvania? And just maintaining that connection to our home base and to our brands.
Tracy, how has that helped you with wine club attrition or acquisition, right? I have to imagine a lot of those calls help you keep those club members a little bit longer.
You're absolutely correct. When they feel like they still have that connection to our team and to our property, we've had folks that we've even called up and we've taken them out. We have a famous tire swing tree in the middle of our vineyard. We've taken folks out on FaceTime and showed them that tree just to keep them connected to the brand and feeling like they could travel to Oregon, even if it's virtually. And I do think that makes a difference when they're making a decision whether or not they might keep one club membership over another. They might favor us because they feel like they have a friend, or they have somebody that they could call up at the vineyard and walk them through what they might pair with something that's already sitting in their cellar. And it does make a big difference when they're considering whether or not they might move away from their club membership.
Now, if I remember correctly, you have a pretty strong attrition rate, that so much so that you've had to dial back some membership benefits, I think. Is that correct?
Oh, as far as acquisition?
Yeah.
Yes, we are fortunate that we have a absolutely gorgeous property, especially at our main estate, Stoller Estate, and we're somewhat near a major metropolitan area, and so we've been in the fortunate position where we do have a lot of folks that would like to join our club to enjoy the on-site benefits. And so, as we've been looking at how we can accommodate the guests and make sure that they're all having a really wonderful time and they do have access to the estate, we've needed to adjust what our club membership benefits are, so that we don't have so many folks wanting to come visit us on a Saturday that it ends up being a poor experience for those club members.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tracy, for joining us. I'm going to throw out the $1 million question that I ask everybody. You know, what do you see for the future of the tasting room over the next 12 months?
We're pretty bullish on this year. You mentioned all the factors that were leading to a little bit of a downturn in visitation, weather, financial concerns, et cetera. But I think what we've seen, even with this little brief uptick in beautiful weather, is that folks do want to come out and visit. They want to have that experience with their friends and families. And I think as we move away from the pandemic, where folks were very much secluded and maybe only gathering in small groups, what we're finding is they're wanting a reason to reconnect both with nature and with businesses, and certainly with their peers and their friends and their family. So we're working hard to create lots of different experiences that does just that. It gives them the opportunity to come out, interact with our properties, interact with our brands and our wines, and most importantly, for them to have a community and somewhere to interact with one another.
That sounds wonderful. I wish I was up in Oregon right now on that tire swing, if I'm entirely honest. Thank you, Tracy, for joining us. Oh, I bet. Absolutely. Thank you, Tracy, for joining us.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, we are going to jump. We've talked a little bit about wine club acquisition and attrition with Tracy, but now let's dive into the numbers. Andrew?
For sure, and you can see here we have the acquisition and attrition rate broken out by major region and by winery size. And then also you can see the average total members at the start of this year, 2023. And in terms of acquisition rate, it was really encouraging to me to see that while they are down a bit compared year to year, they are still outpacing attrition rate. And then again, small wineries doing quite well with an acquisition rate of 43% compared to an attrition rate of 5%. Napa 27, Sonoma 25, Central Coast right there with 26. The rest of California, interesting to see when you really compare the data across multiple questions, how different the rest of California is. And again, it's the diversity of the state, more than 4,000 wineries. Pacific Northwest with a 30% acquisition rate compared to a 24% attrition rate. And then the rest of the U.S., though, at 29 versus 26 in terms of attrition. So that's the big picture in terms of membership, acquisition, and attrition.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I am so glad to see those acquisition and attrition rates for the smaller producers. I know many of them were hit fairly hard with COVID, having to very quickly adjust their marketing strategies since they no longer had a tasting room to bring people into and try to make that conversion. Very, very good to see. And I have a hunch that a lot of these attrition rates are due to people picking up the phone, calling their customers and saying, hey, maybe just put it on hold for, one shipment or two, waiting to see how the economy changes. Hopefully it's not because they've lost a job. Maybe it is just because they've had too much wine in their cellar. I don't ever see that as a problem personally, but that's fine. Right, maybe give them a chance to get through some of all of that wine sitting in the fridge.
There is, and just to go back on small wineries, there is a caveat there in that, of course, there are so many of them in terms of the U.S. wine industry. So that is something to also keep in mind, and the experience is not uniform. But putting it on hold is better than losing a wine club member, and that was one of the reasons for this year we were particularly interested in the fourth quarter of 2022, because I remember when I was doing a reporting for a focused issue on DTC in the analytics report, we were starting to hear that a lot of those rosy projections for DTC at the end of last year were falling a bit short, in particular because people were like, oh, okay, got to pause. You know, the gift giving, the corporate giving also wasn't as lucrative as it had been during the pandemic. So those are some major concerns that started popping up. And we saw that continue into the first and second quarter of this year. And those economic anxieties, played a major role then.
It's got to be so hard to benchmark some of this information, right? You go from such a boom year of 2021 to, I don't want to call it a bust in 2022, but it was certainly more subdued, right?
Yeah.
There was a little bit more anxiety. And when I'm thinking about benchmarking your sales, the first thing I actually think about is your tasting room staff, right? Because so much of their bonus is attributed to whether they've made the conversion to wine club or the conversion to sales, right? So how do you set a goal for some of them, something that they can actually live up to when you're comparing against 2021, which was such a great year for absolutely everybody?
Yeah, it's a real challenge. And it reminded me, our research partner and part of the company, we're partners with Gomberg Fredrickson, and the editor there, John Moromarco, was making this point, proved to be quite prescient in terms of the early days of the pandemic. This is going to be a challenge, regardless of what happens, for businesses trying to balance, or compare year to year, and that definitely proved to be the case.
Yep. Okay, well, I brought it up, and now I hate to belabor the point, but we did ask our survey respondents to mention how much they were paying their employees in both terms of hourly wage and per club sign-up bonus. And unsurprisingly, a lot of wine countries are in high cost of living areas with very limited housing. And it's hard to work an entry-level job or a hospitality job when you're sort of struggling to make ends meet. But what's good to see with these results is that the hourly rate has gone up across the U.S. And that the average per club sign-up bonus has stayed at least flat, if not increased in some regions.
That's great, and it is not easy to find people these days, of course. That being said, when you do have good people, they are invaluable to building those relationships. And I have to say, I was a bit surprised and I thought that when I was first looking through the data here, that the average per club amount here was the cost, perhaps, when you break it down in terms of operations and staff time. And then I was, no, this is the bonus. So I was surprised that the average bonus for a new Napa County Winery Wine Club member was $30, which seemed quite modest to me, given that what we see in terms of the average wine club order for those wineries. So that is, this is the front line in terms of what's become a very competitive DTC market, particularly as we go out of those easy days of 2021. And then even before that, when we had that long run of regular DTC growth, definitely in terms of shipments, you can look at that. And then, so right now, it's part of that cost overhead that is such a challenge, but good people are really invaluable in terms of both being in the tasting room and building that total DTC sales program.
Absolutely, yeah. In talking with HR representatives and talking with tasting room employees, I'm hearing a lot of the same things that, especially when inflation started to become as prevalent in daily conversation and daily shopping as it did, right? Everybody was coming to their HR rep, said, I need a raise. And so maybe HR couldn't necessarily deliver a higher average hourly raise or a per club sign-up bonus, but some of the things that I've been hearing they were doing were giving out gas cards to help pay for mileage to and from their house when gas was almost $6 a gallon in California. They were doing extra education for some of the employees, sending them to their WSET program, even helping pay for regular college courses just to make sure that the employee stayed with their company. Because as we all remember, and it still is to this day, very hard to find tasting room staff. And qualified tasting room staff. Perfect. So since we have mentioned that, your staff members are your front line, they are your best brand ambassadors, they are the ones building the connections with your customers. We also wanted to take a look at something else new this year. We've asked our employees to take on more elevated tasting experiences, right? We've heard that the millennials and now that everybody's coming out of COVID, they want to go to a winery and spend some time there, spend some time with friends, really get to know the brand, get to have an experience that isn't just belly up to the tasting bar. So this year we asked them to deliver what their average basic tasting room or tasting fee was and what their average elevated tasting fee was. And I'm a little surprised. Surprised and not surprised at Napa's numbers.
Yep, that's. It's interesting. That's quite a Napa County. It's competing in the global luxury market. So elevated experience there is definitely going to definitely be higher than other regions. But it's about 2 to 1 when you look at that roughly in terms of the basic experience versus the elevated experience. And this is part of again that staffing conversation too, because in terms of having to do more with fewer people or less resources, you might then have to change the cost structure to not only cover the base cost of that experience, be it the food or the time, the extra touring perhaps, but then also cover a more limited staff budget and also availability. But yeah, this has made, again, the competitive landscape in DTC and even the tasting room that much harder.
Absolutely. And, this is actually sort of the perfect segue into our next guest speaker. Andrew, would you do us the honor of introducing Riley?
My pleasure. Riley Slack is joining us from her family's winery in Santa Barbara. And Riley, we're very excited that you can join us here today. And could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Foxen in terms of staff management and structuring both the cost of the taste experience and also compensation and bonuses?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Wine Business Monthly, and Andrew and Erin. Happy to be here. It's been a challenge for the last few years, definitely. We are we've been increasing our just regular tasting fees kind of as things have been increasing across the county. We did actually some operational research, just kind of grassroots research of contacting our other winery people in Santa Barbara County and kind of seeing what people were doing in that way. And then we've also been kind of trying to figure out, as we've been increasing on-site events, and trying to figure out what a sweet spot is for what consumers are willing to pay for an on-site event that either includes food, doesn't include food. So we've been doing some research and striking out a little bit, but learning some lessons regarding that. With tasting room compensation, it's a challenge, especially for small businesses, as Erin mentioned, in an area where there's not a lot of housing at all. We are not close to a metropolitan area, so there's limited housing, limited talent pool to pull from. And we are, we do what we can. We've increased our hourly wages up about 25% in the last 3 years. We work on kind of really honing in on what our benefits are for a small business. I think we're going probably a little bit above and beyond what we, kind of the baseline of what we could be doing. We're offering a retirement account, which most wineries our size do not do. We do regular CPI increases. There was one other thing I wanted to mention, but I can't recall what it was. Anyway, it's been a challenge. We do offer a tip line for everything, and that definitely motivates our staff to do that kind of above and beyond service. And we've been working on kind of reworking our compensation. Our commission programs. Figuring out what is actually motivating our staff, and gathering that data, listening to them, and implementing commission programs that make a difference to them. And it's worked out. We've had most of our tasting room team for more than 6 years, which is really, really great. We're very proud of that.
Fabulous, yeah. And I'm curious, in terms of what you do at Foxen as part of kind of that incentive, how do you see that reflected in building relationships with people who come into the tasting room? In terms of the staff and how they approach that, building that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. We, I think again, because we've had our staff has been with us for a long time, they really are a part of the Foxen story at this point. So because we do kind of everything we can to treat them as valuable people and extremely valuable employees, they are very happy to share that Foxen story and to be a part of that story and connect with consumers in that way. We have club members, we have non-club members come into the tasting room asking for specific employees that have been there for a long time. They want to connect with the people that they've been seeing for a long time. So it's really an advantage to us to have our folks be able to connect in that way with the folks visiting us.
That's fabulous. That sounds really great. And I'm curious, Riley, if you could just talk us through a bit about your experience at Foxen in terms of the end of 2022 through the beginning of this year.
It was a challenge. End of 2022, I think we had high expectations for coming out of kind of the deep shutdown pandemic uncertainty. And it didn't really end up the way that we were expecting it to. Our sales were definitely lower in November and December than we may have wanted, and we were expecting it to. Visitation was definitely down. And then the first quarter of this year was rough with weather. We got hit very hard, especially at Foxen. Our road was closed for 16 days in the first 6 weeks of the year. So it was hard to be able to, we couldn't have staff there, couldn't have people there. So it was definitely a challenge. And we've been trying to come out of that and think of different ways that we can connect with people who would have liked to be at the tasting room during that time. But it was a challenge. We're looking forward to the beautiful weather that's on the way.
Yep, it's great. We're enjoying that here up on the North Coast too. And so as we start a new year, a new season, I'm curious what you're doing in terms of maybe events or promotions or other things at the winery to get people to the tasting room.
Yep, we actually have a project that we've been working on for almost a year. We're really excited to hopefully have it done by the end of this year of installing electric vehicle chargers at our tasting room. We are about 30 minutes from anywhere, 16 miles from anywhere. So we're really excited to have that as a reason for people to come visit the tasting room, to be a point where they can charge while they are having a tasting or having a glass of wine. And also we plan to have free charging as a benefit to our club members as well, to get more club members to come out to the winery and be able to just replenish that EV battery life while they are visiting our beautiful canyon setting. We've also been and plan to do in the future, we've been, as I mentioned, testing out experience prices. So we are focusing on educational experiences in relation to our wine, partnering with local vendors here, cheese vendors, kind of painting in the vineyard things that we really hadn't done in the past, to try to get people a different excuse to come out and visit our property.
Very exciting. That sounds like it's going to be a great and busy summer at Foxen. I'd like to hear that. So I'm curious in terms of what you're seeing or what your expectations are for the coming year versus in new consumers or build or because of the major overhanging question of so much we talk about in the industry is connecting to that next generation or those consumers who don't already have a relationship with wine. How do you address that in terms of outreach while of course maintaining those invaluable club members that have built that loyalty with the winery?
Yeah, that's a challenge, I think, for wineries of any size right now as we move into the kind of the next 40 years of what the business looks like, let alone the next year. But something we are really kind of honing in on is I am second generation ownership and family at Foxen. And that's something that we are really focusing on is who are the next generation of folks that are involved. We are all millennials. So we are kind of that buying power for the next 40-ish years, and kind of figuring out how we fit into that historical Foxen story and really figuring out kind of that family-oriented things, and then also kind of really connecting to what our company values are and communicating those out into the world. One big one is sustainability. And that's something that many people want to know about in relation to agriculture and wine. And it's something that we are focusing on trying to promote, talk about, and champion.
Great. And, on the topic of sustainability, something that we seem to forget about quite a bit is it's not just land, it's also people. It's your tasting room staff, the people who have been there for a while, who have built relationships with everybody. You had mentioned earlier that, you were really listening to the things that drive them, that move the needle, right? What would matter to them in terms of compensation or continuing to work with your company. Could you share some of those insights? Because I'm sure wineries everywhere want to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. We are luckily in a position to where our founders are on site often, and just having them available to just have questions asked, to share part of the Foxen story, the Foxen history, is something that our team asks for and wants. And we do what we can to do that. So there's kind of that connection where we're family, but we're not family. In our 35-person company, we spend time and effort with purposeful education as well, which are what they want. They want to be able to share everything they can about a wine, about the Foxen story, about Santa Barbara County. We spend at least one day a year closing down the tasting room, closing down production operations, closing down vineyard operations, and going out and experiencing what other tasting rooms have to offer as well, which is a great opportunity for kind of a bonding with all of our employees. Owners are there, administration's there, everybody's there, which is really great. And listening to, again, like you meant, like listening to compensation things. We are, as I mentioned earlier, about 16 miles from anywhere, and something that we thought about and kind of figured out last year is we had a few employees asking, we historically had done a travel stipend that we were kind of tightening our belt a little bit, and that was one of the benefits that we unfortunately took away. And it's something that we re-implemented last year when gas prices got very high, and we listened. There was some people who were like, is that ever going to come back? And I was like, there's no reason why it shouldn't. You are very valuable to us, and we need to show you that you are.
Fantastic. So we had a question come in across the text line, and I want to remind everybody that you can send in your questions. I am checking them and trying to intersperse them throughout. That's 707-395-7375. Riley, you're in Santa Barbara County. There has been a little bit of a rise in satellite tasting rooms, in urban tasting rooms, in moving out of wine country and into a more metro area. How has that affected what you're doing at Foxen? I know you have 2 locations, correct?
We do. Both of our locations are on the estate. We probably a decade ago thought about maybe putting a tasting room into the Funk Zone in Santa Barbara, which is urban tasting room area. And realized that it was going to be more of a challenge than we figured would be worth it from an ROI standpoint. Translating what that kind of Foxen history and Foxen story was into an urban tasting room wasn't quite for us. But I think there's a huge advantage to having consumers in front of your brand and tasting your wines when they don't have to make that trek out to your estate. So it's a challenge, and it's something that we do think about. But I'm not sure that it will be right for us at any time. But I have peers who their tasting room is in Los Olivos, for example, where there's a lot of tasting rooms, and it's nice to be able to get kind of people in front of you. However, there is also that trade-off of the people who do make it out to the estate, who make it out to the winery that's a little bit further, tend to have a little more intention with their visit. And I think you're seeing people that want to be there, are expecting to buy wine or planning to buy wine, more likely to join your tasting or your wine club versus folks who might be on an urban wine trail or in town where there's 40 tasting rooms and kind of just trucking along for the day. And do you sell an individual bottle versus people walk out with a case at our tasting room? So there's that.
Great. We actually had another question come in as you were talking, and this is a really interesting one. How much importance do tips play for staff, right? I think it's a pretty common thing now, at least whenever I go out to a tasting, to see a tip line. It's just now expected. I remember when I started in this industry a little over a decade ago, nobody tipped the tasting room employees. What have you seen? What are average tip sizes like? Any information there for us?
Yeah, it's interesting. From an operational standpoint, I'm not sure how I feel about tips. Our employees love it, and I would never remove that tip line for anything. It's something that they strive for and want to strive for. Um, and it's a lot. I mean, we see our full-time tasting room staff will get paid out $800 every pay period, which is 2 weeks, and that's just tips. Um, it's definitely something that, from a financial standpoint, can be an advantage because it's an in out. There's no really liability to the business of doing that, but it's it's interesting because I ultimately we want our employees to be excited about what they are doing, and they are. But kind of the larger picture, you want employees to be excited about connecting with consumers, selling your wine, sharing your story, rather than just motivated by tips. So there's kind of that. I think it's going to be a continuing conversation for years and years.
No doubt about that, and not just in the wine industry, in the restaurant business as well. At this point, we'd like to also bring back Tracy. I know, Tracy, you've been seeing a lot of these same patterns and trends. Anything you'd like to add on this?
I could speak to the tips as well. I would say that that's a significant part, as Riley just said, of many of our team members' compensation overall. And I would agree, that it does become a motivating piece to them. And as the management team, we're really trying to support them in being able to provide the level of service that those guests are expecting. I think that our team members work very hard. They're definitely, in that same category as a very high skilled person at some of the finest restaurants that you might visit, and that the guests want to acknowledge their service with the tip. So it's something that we are looking at as well, but also trying to be cognizant of this kind of global idea that everything gets tipped. So if folks wander in and they're just coming straight up to the counter, purchasing 2 bottles of wine to take with them out the door, we won't necessarily turn around that tip line. We're not expecting them to tip on essentially just a cash and carry transaction, but the team members work very hard to build their knowledge and provide exemplary service. So tipping is an important part of their compensation.
Tracy, I'm curious, in terms of tips, the importance to them for the staff, has it gotten to the point ever where it starts to outweigh the bonus program or a possible bonus?
From at our locations, I would say that the tipping is probably equal or exceeds what they might make from a sales bonus perspective. The bonus structures within our organization are set up both for wine sales and for club conversions. But those are equally important. Sometimes those sales go hand in hand. So, for example, if you've signed up a new club member, they might take 6 or 12 bottles with them right then. And we do allow some semblance of stacking of some of those bonuses. So, and they also know that those folks are more likely to come back and see them. So I would say that all of the different pieces really round out their compensation.
Oh, Tracy, we had a really good question come in. You have multiple tasting rooms across Oregon. Are you seeing more visits by small groups versus individuals, or families versus couples? And then what are their habits while they're there? What are your employees reporting back on how they like to enjoy your tasting rooms?
That's a really great question. So we do have a variety of tasting rooms. So it makes my role kind of unique. So we have both that classic on-site large vineyard view property, and that property, what we're starting to see in recent months is larger group visitation, certainly. So as throughout the pandemic, we had kind of restricted group sizes just so that we would be able to accommodate everybody, so that we would have a table. We were for quite some time reservation only. In order to anticipate who we could accommodate in a day, we had capped our visitation levels. Well, now as we're moving on and we're opening up walk-ins and whatnot, we're starting to see those large groups. We're seeing the tour buses of folks wanting to come back out again. We're definitely seeing the big group parties, whether they're graduation parties and other celebrations, wanting to see us on those properties. And it's not just on the larger vineyard property. We're seeing that in our satellite tasting rooms as well. That being said, yesterday I was in one of our more urban setting tasting rooms, and I had a revolving door of single female travelers. So these were women that were just out exploring the Pacific Northwest completely on their own, popping in, enjoying a tasting and some really great conversations. So I feel like we're really seeing a smattering of every style of visitation, and I think that speaks to how we as an industry should be talking to our current guests and our future guests, that there is something for everybody, whether you are just out with your book and want to enjoy a wonderful tasting and some conversation with your host, or you're wanting to be out and enjoying, wine country with a large group of friends and family, that we should expand who we're looking to target and who we're looking to include as guests at our properties.
I love the way that you've said that. We should be looking to expand the way that we talk to our guests and who we bring in. And, this brings up another great question that came in across the text line. And I'm actually going to invite Riley to answer this one because it dovetails nicely with some of, what you have mentioned to us. What do you think about the press coverage around how millennials just aren't interested in wine and we're not speaking to them and connecting to them? Or creating experiences that really resonate with them. And then also, as an aside, any requests for lower alcohol wines? I kind of, as a millennial personally, I don't know if I want the low alcohol wine, but again, I'm the oddball in the millennial group.
Sure. Yeah. So I think I don't know, as a millennial, I would drink wine. All my friends drink wine, but I guess I am I skew all of the data because I was brought up in the wine industry. So it's, I'm definitely the skewed side of that data, but I think there's other ways to think about it. Millennials don't have, in general, as much expendable income as previous generations before them who became kind of drinking age and were the consumers. So there's less, I think there's less millennials joining wine clubs where they're not committing to thousands and thousands of dollars a year. In kind of a traditional wine club sense. If we evolve our wine clubs to make it more flexible and focus a little more on different things than just kind of that traditional, like, here's your wines, here's what you get. Customization, I think, is big for millennials but I want to drink this now and this then. So I don't want just your 3 wines or your 4 wines that were chosen. I understand why, but maybe not what's going to be for them. And I think there's a lot of things, especially coming out of the pandemic and all of our shutdown, which is probably true for more than just millennial generation, but experiential drinking, community drinking, right? Like tasting wine, that kind of thing where you're connecting with your people in a glass of wine or a bottle of wine is something that I think speaks to a lot of people these days. And it's how do we market, how do we shift to be able to do that, to show that that's something that's important to us and we understand it's important to you, so it's also important to us.
Great. Thank you, Riley. All right, we are starting to wind down here, coming up on time, but I have one last question from the audience that I'd actually like both of you to address before we end today, and that is, if you're a new tasting room or a smaller tasting room, maybe even one in just, a harder to reach area, what new things are you trying to drive people there? How are you building awareness for the fact that this tasting room exists? And so, Riley, I'm going to kick it to you first.
Sure. I'd recommend show people what it's like to be there. Social media is huge. Short form video via social media is huge. Show people what it's like. Make them want to physically be at your space. Show them what the space looks like. Show them what they can get there, and show people's faces, both your employees, other customers, if they give you permission. Show them what it's like to be in the space that you are building out.
Wonderful. And Tracy, your thoughts?
I would add on to that community partnership. So who else already is in that area that might have guests and customers that look like the profile that you're looking for? So work with your neighbors, work with other businesses that might be able to spread the good word that you're the new kid in town. Put on community events, certainly include your industry partners. We've found that industry partners are some of the best referral partners. Welcome them all into your space so they know what it looks like. They know what kind of wines you're pouring. And when they have guests in front of them that are maybe saying, hey, I don't have plans tomorrow, or what should I be doing next weekend? You're going to be top of mind and they're going to send them your way.
Great. Well, Tracy, Riley, thank you both so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Your experts and insights really helped us present a complete picture of what's going on in the tasting room in a very interesting year so far in 2023.
Perfect. Well, I know just from myself here, I'm so glad to have our expert panelists here to join us. Andrew, thank you for joining me today. I want to thank the Wine Business Analytics team for going through and getting all of this amazing data for us. Yes, these slides will be available after the broadcast. The full results report will be released in the July issue of Wine Business Monthly, and all participants in the survey will get benchmarkable results, everything broken out by region and by winery size segments. If you want to participate in next year's survey and make sure that you get those results as well, please email Andrew at winebusiness.com. And once again, just thank you for joining us. Andrew, any last thoughts?
No, I think we covered it. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us. And if you have questions about the survey or anything we do in terms of the data group or the analytics report, don't hesitate to shoot me a message. We'd love to talk about data and what we're seeing, what we're reporting on. We're going to be covering this, throughout the year, just like everything else we do in the magazine as well, in terms of not only sales and marketing, but winemaking across the board. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, and you'll find us at a tasting room in about an hour's time.